Welcome back to another NoCode.Tech video, and in this one we're going to be looking at the basics of Bubble. If you haven't heard of Bubble before, it is a very powerful, infinitely flexible, and as a result incredibly popular web app builder. And although it focuses on websites and web apps, through a variety of plugins or different workarounds, you can even use it to build mobile apps as well. One of the things I really like about Bubble too is it is well known for its huge ecosystem. It's got tons of different templates for every use case you could imagine, tons of different plugins for every piece of functionality, service you might want to integrate with, and as a result it's really easy to come on Bubble and either have a lot of the work in your idea done for you or be able to immediately take something, brand it however you want and go from there. And in fact, Bubble's ecosystem is so big that it's even sprung up other multi-million pound companies like Zero Code that make their own plugins, their own templates, etc. And when I say plugin, what do I mean? Well, essentially a plugin is a little bit of functionality that you can add into Bubble, into whatever app you're building that your users can then use. If you look here on Zero Code, for example, there's a plugin to turn a web page into a PDF. There's one to do streaming for conferencing. You can put a video player in there. You can mess around with really advanced charts and tables. You've got something for uploading multiple files. Any problem that you could run into, there's a good chance the Bubble ecosystem is going to have a solution for it. So let's go and dive in and take a look at what a new app looks like. So when you hit this little button, it's going to immediately ask you a bunch of different questions. First of all, you're going to have to give your app a name. I'm just going to call this one more NCT test app. And I say one more because I've already been playing with a couple already. What kind of app are you building? Well, there's tons of different options here. I am going to say we're building a software as a service or SaaS app. Is it customer facing or internal? Let's say customer facing for now. Now you can put in details of what you're building. Bubble will use that later if you ask for support or anything like that. I'm going to leave it blank from now. And what's my goal? Well, I just want to play around. Let's hit create new app. And immediately for the get-go, by the way, Bubble's letting you know, reminding you that you can go and grab a template from their template marketplace that might help you get a little bit started a little bit quicker. But we're going to load into the Bubble interface and take a quick look around what we've got here. Now there's a lot of stuff that happens when you come on here. Bubble's asking for my location because there is a component on the page which uses location, which is one of the features of Bubble. It also has this new application assistant. It will ask you a few questions that will help you get it set up. We're going to close that for now because I want to just show you how all this fits together and how it works. So don't worry too much about that. So immediately when we come into the Bubble editor, the interface can be a little bit overwhelming, but let me kind of show you around what we've got in here. So first of all, we're here on this boilerplate page. Bubble will put this in here for every app that you start, although clearly as you saw in the application assistant, you are able to start with a blank page if you like. And it feels a little bit like if you've used tools like Webflow, for example, or Softer, then it feels a little bit like that. And if you haven't, don't worry. But essentially, because you're building web pages first and foremost, you have this kind of block-based layout where one block stacks on top of another block. Within that block, you then have more blocks like this. And essentially, every element on Bubble takes place in this little block. And what you can do at any point is you can click a block and you can start to drag that wherever you like. I could put it there. I could take this header and put it right there. And then you can even take certain elements and resize them. So while some other no-code tools are very pernickety or very pedantic about exactly where you can put pieces of text or other elements, in Bubble, as long as it's on the page, you can move it around and put it wherever you like, and Bubble will just seamlessly handle the code underneath. So I can immediately make changes to the page, and if I scroll down, I've got all sorts of more complicated functionality. And again, it's just Bubble's way of showing you what it can do. It's got maps, it's got search, it's got repeating data lists, and I'll show you how those work in a bit more detail later on. Down the left here, we've got this little part where you can select various different items, and you'll see a lot of things here you might already be familiar with. If you haven't already watched the No-Code Fundamentals videos, then I highly recommend doing that because I talk about a lot of the common visual components that you can drag and drop on any no-code tool, but especially on Bubble. And some of the obvious ones we've got here are text, so I can drag a piece of text in. It's going to pop up this little configuration on the side, and I can type whatever I like, this is a text box. And There's a ton of different customization options in here. I'm not going to get into them just yet, but one thing to keep in mind is Bubble is probably the most infinitely flexible tool that you've seen so far. And what I mean by that is, even on a simple piece of text, there are tons and tons and tons of different options, different tabs here, different things that I can do, which means Bubble has a harder learning curve than most no-code tools. If you're absolutely non-technical, absolutely new to this, then, it might be worth trying a simpler tool, or it might be worth just accepting that you do have a slightly longer learning curve here. But once you get over that learning curve, once you figure out exactly how Bubble works and begin to feel comfortable with it, then you're going to be hard pressed to find a tool that can do just as much as Bubble can. So let's keep plodding through, and I'll just give you a look at a few more bits before we end the video and jump into the more detailed videos on each of the fundamental no-code pillars and how you can use them in Bubble. So first of all, we've got this workflow functionality over here, and it works pretty simply. You can click a different trigger, you can set up a new trigger or a new event. Now, if you remember from our no-code fundamentals on workflows, we talked about events as being something that happens on the front end that triggers some sort of workflow or some sort of process kicking off. So I can do things like, when a marker on a map is clicked, when a specific element, an element's just another word for a component, like a button, a piece of text, a table, when that's clicked, I can kick something off to happen, and that's just going to let me come in, start to add different actions, and there is a ton of different stuff you can do. So we'll explore that in a bit more detail later as well. If I pop into the data side, again, versus other no-code tools you might have seen, there is a lot in here. It is very complicated. There's a lot of information, a lot of detail, but quite often you can ignore all the complicated parts and just focus on what you want. So here, for example, when it says data types, a data type is just what Bubble calls a database table. You've got users by default. You can add a new one in here, like new things, for example. Doing it with a Z there, sounds like some sort of hip hop group. So you can put that in there. You can start to add new fields, and all the usual suspects are here. Text, number, date. You've got yes, no, or a Boolean, as we might better know it, Boolean, whatever you want to call it. You've got various other kind of different types of data manipulation things here. So you can set certain rules that decide whether or not how your data here says publicly visible. You can set certain rules that dictate kind of who can see it, who can't. You can set up various different, you can do option sets. So if you wanted to have a drop down where you can select different types of information, you can do that here. You can of course keep various different assets or files if you wanted to use images, PDFs, whatever it is that you need for your users to access. And under the data, the app data, this is where you can actually edit the data you've already got. So I could come into users and I can see those fields there. I can now add a new entry. I can upload multiple pieces of data at once. I can do bulk modifications, modify, etc. If you want to do something related to data, I can almost guarantee you Bubble is going to have the functionality to do that. One of the things that I quite like about Bubble, although there's a ton of different elements here when I'm playing around with the UX, actually, instead of having to style every individual element and say, okay, I want the text to be this color, this size, whatever, Bubble will actually take care of a lot of that for you through its styles menu. So when I come in here, if you look on the left here, I've got all sorts of I've got an element here, button, and it will say outline button, it will say primary button, it will say primary button light. Essentially, Bubble just comes with all these pre-made styles, and you can see them sort of showing up some of the styling options on the right hand side. And so what I can do is when I put a piece of text in, rather than me worry about the specifics of the style, although I can do that if I like, down here I can just hit style and I can change that to be whatever I want. So I've already got this pre-existing style called heading 1 dark, and you can see that above here where it says Bubble boilerplate. Now I'm trying to drag that text out, it's a little bit too big for this box. But you can see that that text looks exactly the same as that. However, I could then change that to be heading 2 and it'll get a little bit smaller. I could change that to be a tip text, whatever you want to make it, you can do it. And at any point you can hit edit style. You can add new styles if you want to do something unique, or you can just change to another one or change how it looks. And so that might feel a little bit complex, but the good thing is, if you have a colour palette you want to stick to, once you've set that up once, you can just ignore it and leave it, and that's it, done. And the other thing that you can do is hit apply theme at the top. Bubble has all these built-in different themes that might look and feel familiar from other apps or other experiences, web experiences you've used. And when you hit that button, it will just automatically apply that styling. So if you wanted a dark looking website, you can hit standard bubble dark theme. If you want to do material design, which is kind of the whole Google Android look, you can do that. If you want to do something that looks a bit like Twitter's Bootstrap, you can click that. You've got flat UI, round UI, all these different options. And the minute you hit apply, that's going to change the style of your website. When we flick back here, immediately it looks kind of different. Not hugely different because a lot of this is custom made, but it just makes some little differences here and there that let you visually, or make your website stand out visually. Again, I've mentioned plugins, and when you go on here, you can add them, you can plug them in. Essentially, you've got loads of different settings around SEO. You've got an API. You can put public API endpoints on. We'll look at all of that later. And you also have logs that will just log everything that happens in your app. And so whenever you create a Bubble app, essentially you've got a link here. Here's one I made earlier that you can preview, and whenever you make any change on here, it automatically updates. So I've made this app here. If you've done our Basics of Webflow course, our Basics of WAMS Stack course already, then you'll probably have seen something that looks a little bit like this before. It's just a quick website I whipped up to try and demonstrate what Bubble can do. And so all I've done here is thrown together something that, well, I hesitate to say it looks nice. It is certainly a very choice colour palette. But I've thrown something together that kind of shows how you can make a UI. We've got a form down there. We've got a repeating data list. All the basic elements you need to start building any kind of no-code app in Bubble. So what we're going to do is, over the next few videos, I'm going to start to put that together. We'll start out with UI and UX, and then we'll move on to things like the database, the workflows, etc. And over the next few videos, we'll just try and put together our own Bubble version of Rate My Doggy. So jump on the next video and we'll get stuck in.